The storm arrived without warning, turning the Texas prairie into a wall of rain and wind that rattled the windows of Samuel Crawford's modest cabin. He had built this place with his own hands 3 years ago, seeking solitude after losing his wife and son to fever back in Missouri. Out here, 20 miles from the nearest settlement, he found a strange peace in the emptiness. The land asked nothing of him except survival, and that was all he had left to give. He was checking the horses in the barn when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost mistook it for the wind. But there it was again, a soft whimper coming from near the fence line. Samuel grabbed his lantern and pushed into the rain, squinting against the deluge. What he found made his breath catch. A girl no more than 12 or 13 lay curled beneath his wagon. Her deerskin dress was torn and muddy, and blood seeped from a gash on her leg, but it was her eyes that struck him most, dark and defiant even through the pain, watching him with the wariness of a trapped animal. He recognized immediately that she was Comanche. The beadwork on her dress, the style of her braided hair, the copper tone of her skin, all spoke of the people white settlers feared most in these parts. Every instinct told him to walk away. The Comanche had raided settlements, killed families, taken captives. They were called the Lords of the Plains for good reason. Harboring one of their own could mean death. Yet as he stood there in the driving rain, all he could see was a child, injured and alone, looking up at him with that same mixture of fear and hope he had seen in his own son's eyes during those final fevered nights. Samuel made his choice. He bent down slowly, speaking in a calm voice, though he knew she probably understood no English. When he reached for her, she flinched but did not fight. Perhaps she was too weak. Perhaps she sensed something in his movements. He lifted her carefully and carried her inside, laying her on his own bed near the fire. She watched every movement he made as he cleaned and bandaged her leg, her jaw set against the pain. When he offered her water, she drank. When he brought cornbread and dried meat, she ate slowly, never taking her eyes off him. That night, Samuel sat in his chair and wondered what dawn would bring. The girl had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by pain and fear. He studied her young face, relaxed now in slumber, and felt something shift inside him. For 3 years, he had been a ghost, going through the motions of living without really being alive. This unexpected visitor, this child of a people he had been taught to hate and fear, had somehow reminded him that compassion was not dead within him. Whatever happened next, he would not regret offering shelter to someone in need. Morning came clear and bright, the storm having passed in the night. Samuel woke to find the girl sitting up, looking stronger but still guarded. He prepared breakfast and they ate in silence. Two people separated by language and culture, connected only by the simple act of shared food. He had just stood to clear the plates when he heard it, the sound of many horses approaching. His blood turned cold. Through the window he saw them, warriors on horseback, dozens of them forming a circle around his property. They sat motionless, faces painted for war, lances and rifles ready. Samuel counted at least 70. The girl rose from the bed, limping to the window. When she saw the warriors, something flickered across her face, relief mixed with fear. She turned to Samuel and spoke rapidly in Comanche, gesturing toward the door. He understood none of the words but grasped the meaning. They had come for her. He was trapped. Samuel's hands shook as he considered his options. He could try to hold them off, maybe take a few down before they overran him. He could use the girl as a hostage, though the thought made him sick. Or he could simply open the door and face whatever fate awaited him. In that moment, every survival instinct screamed at him to fight. But then he looked at the girl's face, at the worry there not for herself but seemingly for him, and he made his second choice in as many days. He opened the door and stepped outside, unarmed, his hands raised and open. The circle of warriors remained still, a wall of bronze muscle and steel discipline. Then the line parted, and a single rider came forward. He was older than the others, perhaps 50, with gray threading through his long black hair. The authority in his bearing was unmistakable. This was a chief, a man of great standing. The morning sun caught on the silver medallion he wore, and Samuel noticed the scars that marked his arms. Evidence of countless battles survived. The chief's eyes were black stones, unreadable and hard. He looked at Samuel for a long moment, then passed him to where the girl now stood in the doorway. The chief spoke, his voice carrying across the yard, and the girl responded. Samuel heard his death sentence in the flow of words he could not understand. He thought of his wife, of his son, and felt strangely at peace. At least he would die having done something decent. The conversation between chief and girl continued. Her voice rose, passionate, gesturing toward Samuel and then to her bandaged leg. The chief listened, his expression unchanging. Finally, he raised a hand for silence. He dismounted and walked toward Samuel with the measured steps of a man who has killed before and will kill again if necessary. Samuel forced himself to stand still, to meet those hard eyes without flinching. The chief stopped 3 feet away. He studied Samuel with an intensity that felt like being laid open, every secret exposed. Then slowly, deliberately, the chief reached for something at his belt. Samuel tensed, expecting a knife. Instead, the chief produced a leather pouch. He opened it and withdrew a handful of turquoise stones, polished and valuable. He held them out to Samuel. Samuel stared, uncomprehending. The chief spoke, his voice deep and commanding, though the language remained foreign. When Samuel did not move, the girl limped forward. She took Samuel's hand, opened his palm, and placed the stones in it, closing his fingers around them. Then she spoke slowly and carefully, repeating what must have been her father's words. Though he understood nothing, he grasped everything. This was gratitude. This was payment. This was respect between 2 men who had each made choices that honored something beyond fear and hatred. The chief placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder, examining her bandaged leg with the careful attention of a father. He looked back at Samuel, and for the first time, something like warmth entered those hard eyes. The chief touched his own chest, then pointed to Samuel, then swept his arm to encompass the surrounding land. The message was clear. You are safe here. You are protected. Your friend, not enemy. Samuel felt his throat tighten. He nodded, unable to speak. The chief smiled just barely and returned the nod. He helped his daughter onto his horse, and she looked back at Samuel one last time. In her eyes, he saw something he thought he had lost forever, the ability to connect, to matter, to make a difference in another person's life. She raised her hand in farewell, and he raised his in return. The warriors wheeled their horses and departed as suddenly as they had come, a river of motion flowing back into the vast prairie. Samuel stood watching until they disappeared into the distance, the turquoise stones heavy in his hand. Around him, the morning continued its ordinary business. Birds sang. The breeze stirred the grass. The sun climbed higher in a cloudless sky, but something had changed. Samuel felt it in his chest, a loosening of the knot that had lived there for 3 years. He had been hiding in this empty land, running from pain and memory. A wounded child had found her way to his door, and in choosing to help her, he had found his way back to himself. The world was not the simple place of good people and bad people, of us and them. It was far more complicated and far more beautiful than that. He went inside and placed the turquoise stones on his shelf, where the morning light would touch them. He did not know what the future held, or whether he would ever see the girl or her father again. But he knew this much. Kindness given freely, even when dangerous, especially when dangerous, was never wasted. It rippled outward in ways impossible to predict, touching hearts and changing minds, building bridges where before there was only emptiness. Samuel Crawford smiled, really smiled for the first time in 3 years. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, no longer a place of exile but a place of possibility. And somewhere out there, a young Comanche girl rode home with her father, carrying her own story of the stranger who had chosen mercy over fear. In the end, they had both been saved,